Well, it's great to have Katie Gore here. Katie's really known as one of the real nation's up-and-coming speech therapists. She's gained recognition for her innovation and techniques. And I think we met a few years ago at the NSA conference, didn't we?
It's been, yeah, I think it has been a few years. Time flies.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I think it was like
so
2 or 3 years.
we've had some great conversations since then, and I'm really looking forward to this call. Let me just give you a brief bio so you know who Katie Gore is. Many of you do, but she's an SLP, MA, and all that. She's the founder and director of Speech IRL, a speech therapy and communication consulting firm based in Chicago, Illinois. Katie's clinical specialties are stuttering, executive function, social communication. She's an adjunct faculty member at Rush University, where she teaches coursework in stuttering and fluency disorders. She also does a lot of work with businesses on communications. And so she has a lot of arrows in her quiver, as they say. So Katie, it's great to be with you. So
It's great to be here. Thank you.
you've all this talent, not only in just all areas of communication. What motivated you to work with people who stutter?
Well, I love this question because I do get asked it a lot. And I totally fell into stutter completely by accident or providence. I feel like a lot of folks who, generally in speech pathology, a lot of folks are drawn to the field because they have some kind of personal experience, maybe a family member who has a communication disorder. Certainly in the specialty of stuttering, a lot of the specialists who work in stuttering are people who stutter themselves. And I did not have any of that growing up. So nobody in my family stutters. I didn't have any close friends who stutter.
Nobody at all.
No. Well, actually, I apparently did stutter when I was a young child. I had the preschool stuttering where it was actually apparently quite severe. And my mother told me that she was afraid I would never be able to talk because it was so prominent. And then it went away on its own. I never had speech therapy or anything, and that's very common with preschoolers. But I didn't find that out until I was actually in my graduate fluency disorders class.
Oh.
I never knew that. I was too young to remember it. So I don't count that because I don't even remember it happening. So I have not had the experience of a person who stutters.
Believe it or not to interrupt you, but my parents told me that I never talked until I was like 4 years old, until right before I entered kindergarten. I don't know what that means, but
if we could go
maybe
back and see ourselves as children, it would be amazing. So I didn't really have any thoughts about stuttering one way or the other. And then in graduate school, I was assigned to one client who stutters, and it was a 4-year-old boy who had begun stuttering fairly recently. And he attended sessions with his father, which is typical for preschool stuttering, that we have the parent in the session.
Yeah.
And I remember, I had never worked with someone who stutters before, and I just did exactly what my supervisor told me to do. And so I remember being told that what we should do is we should play, and we should teach him about bumpy speech and smooth speech. And then whenever he stuttered or had a bump, we would say, "That was bumpy. Can you say it again smooth?" And we did that for 10 weeks, which was the duration of the quarter at the school clinic. And then I remember at the end of that, I don't recall if the child's spontaneous fluency or his management of his blocks or whatever improved or not. At the end of it, his father said, "Okay, well, what's sort of the long-term plan here? Like, how long do we do this for? Is this supposed to help him long-term? What's going on?" And I just remember having no idea. I was like, I don't know. I was just doing what I was told to do. And I just looked at the supervisor, and I think she kind of gave some sort of answer. Or maybe I did answer. I don't know. But that was my sole experience with stuttering in graduate school. And my memory, again, was sort of being told what to do, wrote, I did it. I had no concept of why or how is this supposed to help. And so that was it. Didn't really have any more thoughts about stuttering. Then when I graduated, I started my career working in a SNF, in a skilled nursing facility. So lots of dementia and stroke patients, that sort of thing. And on the side, I was contracting with a private practice, and I told them I would like to work with adults, and they mostly saw children. But they did have an adult who called in who was a person who stuttered and said he had had speech therapy as a child, but he was looking to get back into it. And since most of their therapist worked with kids, but I had said I would like to work with adults. They asked if I'd be willing to take them. And I said, sure. Not that I had any expertise, but that's sort of one of the advantages, I think, of being fresh out of school is you'll do anything because you don't know how to do anything.
Yeah.
And so I started working with him. And then a couple weeks or months later, they had another person who called in, another professional adult who also stuttered. And I said I would like to work with him as well. And the two of them were really different. So one of them was very covert. So he was basically fluent all the time. He would occasionally have these very long blocks, but nobody knew that he stuttered outside of his wife and his parents. And he was studying to be a physician. And so there was a lot of presentations he had to do and getting ready to do interviews and all these things. The communication is a really important thing. And then the other person had a more physically prominent stutter. But because it was so prominent, everybody knew that he stuttered. He had been living openly with a stutter his whole life. And so it was really interesting kind of to see the ways in which sort of the physical nature of the speech impacted the life relationship they had with their stutter. And that it was working with the both of them that made me realize this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And it's because it was about so much more than just the speech. It was all about how are you relating to the people around you? How are you expressing yourself to the people around you? How are they perceiving you? What are you choosing or struggling to allow to be seen? It was all these big life questions that we deal with stuttering. So that was that's how I discovered it. And then from there, I really started actively pursuing it, trying to get plugged in with the National Stuttering Association and other support groups, learning more online and then trying to meet more people who stutter. So that's my convoluted story.
So you began knowing nothing, and things have evolved. How have you evolved with how you work with people and strategies and how you face all this?
So I think, because I knew nothing and I knew nothing going in, which I think I actually am so thankful for, and I think that's a really powerful mindset to have, is the mindset that there's so much that you don't know, and so you just need to learn as much as you can. And so that's really what I did early on. I was going to professional conferences and just gobbling up all the stuttering education I could from leaders in the field. So very early on, I learned about acceptance and commitment therapy, and then started following a lot of the folks who were doing work in that. And sort of coincidentally, this was 7 or 8 years ago at this point. So this was before it had become as well known as it is now. And so I was sort of fortunate. I just happened to discover it because it was somewhere and it had the word stuttering in it. I was like, okay, this is a stuttering thing. This looks good. And I really liked what I learned about it. So I started doing more and more of it. And then 3 years later, everybody else caught on. And at that point, I had been doing it for 3 years. So I sort of was able to participate in the teaching community a little bit more there, which was really great. But I think really my approach early on was, in the evolution, was just learning everything I could about every approach that was out there. And there were a lot of great opportunities to do so. So not really sort of preferring one method or the other, but sort of, as you were saying, the more quivers you can have in your belt, or more arrows in your quiver, I guess is the phrase.
That's better.
That's the one. I was like, wait, something about that one doesn't work. You're just more equipped to be of service to the folks who are coming to you for help, because everybody is going to need something different. And, sometimes I would learn a new method and I'd be like, oh, this is so great. And it works so great for this person I'm working with, but it's just not quite the right fit for this other person. So what else is out there? And then you learn to mix and match and all that stuff as you go forward in your career.
So is fluency the primary goal, or do you have something else that you're shooting for?
So fluency is definitely not my primary goal, I would say. That is the most common request when someone comes to therapy, is you say, what do you want out of speech therapy? I want to be fluent. Right. And I would say fluency, in almost all cases, more fluency is an outcome of therapy, but it can't be the goal. If it is the goal, then it probably won't be the outcome, paradoxically. I would describe high level the goal as being able to develop communication skills that allow you to communicate and express yourself in the ways that you want to, when you want to, on your own terms. And often a component of that is developing physically easier speech, particularly for folks who have a lot of physical struggle with their speech. So that's where, fluency is not the be all end all goal, but I think it's also very important not to discount the importance of fluency. It's for some folks more than others, perhaps. But if it's very physically difficult to talk, that is going to be a barrier to having a free and open communication experience. But I would say a free and open communication experience is the goal. And whether that is achieved through some level of physical speech work, or whether it's achieved more through mindset work and psychological introspection and self-challenge and avoidance reduction, or some blend of all those things, which is most often the case, that's really what we're going for.
Yeah. I mean, I've come to believe that, at least in my case, in my journey, that fluency was a byproduct of all the other things I was doing. And that if you just focus on fluency, it can be a trap, and it can be very discouraging. And you can say, all right, well, I guess I can't do it. Well, no, you can't. You can do something. There's always a way forward. So for, I keep running into people who have given up on speech therapy, but they'd like to improve their speech, but they just haven't found the right therapist or the right approach or whatever. And I know that you've created a lot of innovative programs like shared voices and those kind of things, but how do you deal with someone who is, an adult who's gone through this and they just met with a lot of disappointment?
Yeah, that's a really common thing, and in stuttering in particular, because there's a lot of speech pathologists who are not experts or just very well versed in the complexities of stuttering, and there's a lot of bad therapy out there. And we get a lot of clients because we do work primarily with adults who we are not their first rodeo in terms of speech therapy. Maybe they've had it, a lot of folks sort of had, kind of meth therapy in the public schools if they were kids and attended the public school, or perhaps had some as an adult or an older teen or college student. But it's very common that people have had sort of not so great speech therapy experiences. And for some, there's been a passage of time and they say, okay, well, you know what, maybe I should jump back in. Maybe I should give it another shot. Maybe I should try to find a different therapist with a different approach. But other people, swear off it completely. And I think both are completely fine. I certainly know folks who had bad therapy experiences and they were like, you know what, darn it, I'm going to figure this out on my own. And they did. You might know something about that. And I think especially nowadays, there's these great online communities, there's YouTube videos, there's so many ways to connect with ideas and people that might be important parts for your journey. And so I think that's fantastic. And I mean, speech therapy is also really expensive. And so if you can find these things on your own, I think that's wonderful. And many people are successful that way. But for someone who likes the structure and likes the accountability of a more traditional speech therapy type setup, I would say, if they have had bad experiences, that there are a ton of great speech language pathologists out there who know a lot about stuttering and are very, very mindful of coming up with what's right for the person. But you should do your homework when you're shopping for a therapist. Most everyone I know, will happily talk with you at length. They're not going to charge you just to get to know you. What's been your experience so far? What are you looking for this time? What didn't work for you in the past? That's a question we always ask our clients who are coming in. If you've had therapy before, what did you like? What did you not like? And what do you think is what you need to move forward?
Right.
So there's, speech therapy in and of itself, I don't think is bad or good. And, when it comes to stuttering, there's good therapy and bad therapy. And so it's just knowing what you want and looking for what's out there.
It sure isn't one size fits all, that's for sure. So you have this program, Shared Voices, that you do. Can you tell us a little bit about that? That's a nice innovation.
Absolutely. So Shared Voices is its own organization. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. It's not connected to my private practice at all. I'm involved with both. And it is a community for people who stutter. That's what we call ourselves. Shared Voice is a community for people who stutter. And I feel very, very strongly about the importance and even necessity of stuttering community for people to chart a successful speech and communication journey. I again, sort of by happenstance, got plugged into the NSA within the first couple of months of when I started really exploring stuttering as a clinician. And for me, for my clinical education, that is where my learning has come from. So I've taken all these courses and stuff about stuttering, but really, I think the most valuable information I have learned is from being in rooms of people who stutter, and not at a therapy session and not at some sort of course, but sitting around a dinner table or sitting at the bar and just hearing people talk about their experiences unfiltered, honestly, and hearing the incredible diversity, but also the themes that really tie everything together. And as someone who tries my best to do good therapy, and then I run a speech therapy practice, so obviously I believe in it, but
pretty good one too.
I think for so many people, though, that community piece unlocks the really fundamentally important ingredients you need for change in a way that speech therapy cannot. And as speech pathologists at Speech IRL, we are huge fans of community groups. We do what we can to support community programs and to get our clients to go to those. And so that's why we built Shared Voices. There's a lot of, certainly there's NSA chapters, and the NSA is a national organization, but we're in a large city like Chicago. Stuttering doesn't affect a huge amount of the population, but Chicago is a big city, and so there's a good, decent-sized population of folks who stutter here. Right. And to create more opportunities for people who stutter to get together, but outside of the context of a support group. So the NSA runs these great support groups, but there's a lot of folks who stutter who don't quite feel that a support group is what they want. So they might want to meet other people who stutter, but they don't want to necessarily go to a room and talk about stuttering for an hour and a half. Or they might feel like support groups are a little more intense and they're kind of past that point in their journey, but they'd still like to be around people. And so we do we do a variety of activities. So we'll do just straight up social activities, both for kids and teens and adults. We'll do these kind of advocacy workshops where we're trying to educate the world about stuttering. So we had a fantastic event back in January. I think that was one of the last things, when we were able to have people in a room together, where we were at a law firm and we had a panel of professionals who stutter, and we invited HR professionals and managers and business leaders who were not people who stutter, who didn't know anything about stuttering. It was just come learn about this disability. We're framing it within the context of, disability and diversity. And if you have employees who are going through this, what they might be going through and how you can support them as a business. And it was a fantastic dialogue. These panelists just spoke so openly, and the folks in the room had great questions about, well, if I'm interviewing a candidate who stutters, and maybe it's one of these interviews where there's multiple people that they have to talk to throughout the day. Maybe they tell me they stutter in my interview. Should I tell the next interviewer that they stutter? Should I leave it to the person themselves? It was just a really great conversation. And all the people who walked out of it, who were not people who stutter, said they learned so much and they were so excited and they would love to bring more of this into their company. So that's really, I think, what Shared Voices is about. It's trying to build the bridge between the stuttering community that is really strong, but can be kind of insular to the world at large, so that we can create more understanding in general.
Interesting. So everyone wants to be inspired. I like being inspired. Do you have any client success stories you want to share? Do you have anything in mind?
Yeah, I saw this question on the list and I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like there are so many, and they're all so inspiring in their different ways. I think one of the things I really like about stuttering therapy is the little inspirations. I just always remember this so clearly. One of my clients early on, who she came into therapy one day and she said, Katie, I had an amazing week. She said, normally when I go to Subway and I order a sandwich, I order it with everything because I only have to say the one word. She's like, but this week I went to Subway and I said all the vegetables I wanted. And it was, it's a small thing, right? But it's huge. And it's it's those moments that I love. But so that's maybe sort of one of those day-to-day successes. And often those are the ones that are most exciting for me. It's those small things, but they are just so huge.
That's a huge one. I mean, I remember asking my friends to order for me.
Yeah.
I remember not going to places that I had to order like that if I didn't have someone there to order for me.
Yeah.
I remember saying, everything.
Yep.
Or if they didn't understand me and they said, oh, you want this? And even if it wasn't what I wanted, I said, oh yeah, you know.
Yeah.
So that's huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a big victory.
So, and then maybe sort of a bigger story that I like to tell is, I had this one client who called me up, and it was November. And this is relevant because he was allowed for his insurance plan 20 speech therapy sessions a year. And so there were 2 months left in the year, and he wanted to use them all up between November and December. And I was like, oh, okay, that's a lot. And I said, okay, well, what are your goals for speech therapy, or why are you in speech therapy? And he was finishing his MBA, and he had a very clear career goal with what he was going to do with his MBA when he was finished. And so he said, there are 3 companies that I've identified that I would like to work for, and this particular job, which I'm now eligible for because of my MBA. But I'm not going to start interviewing with them until I'm done speech therapy and until I fix my stutter. And I was like,
oops.
Okay, no pressure. Right, so just 3 companies. And okay, well, let's see what we can do here. And I was like, maybe do you want to just, even if you didn't stutter, that's just like a really specific goal. Anyway, and so we worked really intensively with those for that 2 months. And it was just mostly on interview skills and managing the stutter and navigating the stutter through the interview. And it was a mix of, talking about stuttering with the interviewer, but also, trying to manage through some tough moments, fluency wise. And so we did that, and then he was busy interviewing. And so he sort of fell off the radar. And then I got a LinkedIn message from him 2 months later, and he got a job with one of those 3 companies.
Wow.
And he was moving to a different state to take the job. So that was, I don't feel that I can take credit for that, but I was honored to sort of be on this journey of someone who had this really determined goal. And initially was very focused on fluency. But one of the things we worked on was saying, you can be successful in the interview even if you stutter in the interview. And that was a big theme of what we worked on. And he left off on the next part of his journey with his goal. So that was kind of a cool thing.
That's great. That's great. My feeling was that success to me was if I could say what I want to whomever I want, whenever I want, that's good enough for me. As long as you could, live the life that you want to live.
Yeah.
And that's what it sounds like you've infused into your clients as well.
Yeah, it's and I think that's what's interesting about the question of an inspiring story is it's so different for every person, and it can be a very specific thing. A lot of folks come to us because they have a particular speaking moment in their life coming up that is really important to them. Right. So, I have to give a best man speech at a wedding, or a lot of it's around sort of weddings and graduations, or being able to honor someone, to speak for somebody else, or to show gratitude for someone else, or to advocate for someone else. And it's always really, really rewarding to just be with that person as they are able to do that thing that they really want to do. So yeah, it's truly just a blessing to be around people who are challenging themselves on this speech journey, because it is so hard. And it's so scary and can feel very hopeless and daunting at times. But to have, at this point in my career, experienced so many stories of people getting to that top of the mountain. And I think what I'm really thankful for is that now when people come to us and they say, I have this thing I want to do, I have this moment where I want to speak, or this activity I want to engage in and participate in, I don't think I can. And I can say without a doubt, absolutely, yes, you can. I know you can, because I have worked with so many people who have had all, in their own ways, different challenges, but the size of the challenge and the feeling of it is the same. And absolutely, you can get there too. And if you're sitting here and you are identifying it and you want to get there, we can absolutely get you there.
And that's so important because, well, I know in my case, I'd given up for decades, but there's always a way forward, and you can get there. And but there aren't any straight lines, at least for me. But you have to stick with it. But It's been great talking with you, Katie, as always. We've had such great conversations, and I look forward to more in the future. I really appreciate you coming on, and hopefully you've inspired quite a few people to move forward with their speech.
So, and thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I think what you just said about there's always a way forward, that is such a key concept for people to understand. And sometimes it doesn't feel like you're going forward. Like you said, it might feel like you're going sideways. It might feel like you're going backwards, but absolutely at the end of the day, you end up forward. So I think that's a wonderful line that you have crafted and for people to remember and to keep repeating. And thank you so much for this work that you're doing of having these conversations and putting this out there for folks, because there are so many different messages and so many different themes, but that's really what ties it together. And I think you're doing just great work sort of showing people the variety of ways that you can move forward, and it is there for you. So thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Take care. We'll talk soon.
Talk soon.